But then we have to include that Jesus said himself that I have the power to lay my life down and I have the authority to take it back up again. So he's almost saying that I did it. I died and I resurrected myself. That is exactly how we can interpret that. What does that mean? It means that the idea of resurrection is also a Trinitarian concept. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit all had a role to play when it comes to the resurrection. So Paul says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, a little bit of ambiguity, a little bit of equivocation. Is the spirit of him which is God? Is that who raised Jesus from the dead? Or is it the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, who raised Jesus from the dead? Because the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of God, the Spirit that God sends forth, the third person of the Trinity that proceeds in eternal procession from the first person of the Trinity. Is he the one who raised Jesus Christ from the dead? Again, the answer is yes. He will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. Again, the Spirit dwells in us. The Spirit of him, but wait a minute, Christ dwells in us. But wait a minute, the Spirit of God dwells in us. So, and then in Galatians, Paul can say, the Spirit of Christ dwells in us. Jesus is in us. So again, that's the point of the New Testament experience, is that God is this complex unity, and at the same time, he expresses himself as Trinity, right? He's one God, but there's this Trinitarian experience going on. So don't let the detractors eat your lunch. Paul says in verse 12 of Romans chapter 8, so then, brothers, we are debtors not to the flesh to live according to the flesh. Again, he circles back around just to remind them, because of your forensic position, because of when I say forensic, I mean like a courtroom setting, a legal status that's applied. Remember, you've watched enough courtroom movies and dramas and TV shows to know, how many of you are old enough to remember Perry Mason, right? I do. I'm old enough, right? I'm showing my age. But the criminal enters the courtroom guilty because there hasn't been a trial yet. So he enters guilty, right? He's been convicted. He's been charged. And so he enters the courtroom charged, and he might even be in handcuffs and wearing prison orange. Who knows? The point being is, he doesn't know his verdict until the trial takes place. So his future is up in the air, right? He doesn't know what if he's going to spend his life in prison or if he's going to walk out free. It's not until the judge, and we're assuming that it's a one trial case, right? It doesn't go to an appeal court and up to a Supreme Court and things like that, but just follow along with my analogy without ripping apart. He comes into the courtroom, he doesn't know his status, but eventually the judge makes a decision based on listening to the two arguments going back and forth, the two different attorneys, the defense attorney on one side and the prosecuting attorney on the other side, or whatever. And eventually the judge brings his gavel down and makes a pronouncement, some type of verdict, right? Maybe it's a jury court or maybe something like that, and the jury helps to make the decision. The point is that typically the verdict is what can stick. Now, again, I know we could make this absurd and say, but wait a minute, there could be an appeal court and he could take it up to another court who could overturn that ruling, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to go into that, all right? Don't get too complicated. I'm trying to make this simple. In God's courtroom, once the sinner is brought into the court and Yeshua takes the case and pleads the case on behalf of the sinner, then if the sinner places his faith in Yeshua, then God's pronouncement when he brings the gavel down is acquitted. You're free. You're guiltless. Why? Not because of something you did. You did commit the crime. Let's just use me, right? Ariel, you're guilty. You committed the crime. But because you placed your faith in my son, I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to acquit you. I'm going to erase the crime from the books, as it were. When I look at you, I see my son. I see his blood applied to your account, and therefore the penalty has been paid, the debt has been paid, and therefore you have been set free. So because that is who you are, Ariel, you no longer have to live as if you're under the old passions of the flesh. They're going to still war against you on the inside, but you don't have to live. You don't have to give in to them. You have a new advocate. You have a new power inside of you, the Holy Spirit. He's going to help you live a life of sanctification and do what's pleasing to me as God the Father. So then, brothers, Paul says in verse 12, we're debtors not to the flesh, but to live according to the Spirit. Notice he even used the word debtors, right? We don't owe the flesh anything. We pay. Why? Because Jesus paid the debt, right?